Welcome to the Django Success Stories panel. I'm Jacob, for those of you who haven't met me yet. I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves and who they work for and what they work on in a minute. But first, just a bit about the format. After sort of some quick introductions, I'm going to launch into asking some questions, and I have sort of a general line of discussion here. But I think this will work better if we kind of do it classroom style. So if anyone says anything that you think is interesting and you want to go deeper into, just raise your hand, and I'll call on you. I'll probably have to repeat your question for the microphone and for the people in the back, and we'll just kind of go where the conversation takes us. The general theme that I'm looking to pull out here is what does we've all sort of learned that Django is really nice for that sort of single-person development, when you're moving really fast and you're just kind of fooling around with stuff and seeing where it goes. But any successful company or project moves beyond that at some point, and you move into a larger team. And at that point, there's all sorts of questions about how do you work as a team, how do you work within a corporate structure in a larger organization, or in one case, a nonprofit structure. How do you work within a larger setting using Django, and how can Django help be successful in those settings, and how does it get in your way? So with no further ado, I think, Matt, let's start down on this end and go that way, and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Matt Croydon, Development Manager at Media for Media, which is the new name for World Online, birthplace of Django. I work on both Ellington, our content management system, written in Django, which was what Django was originally extracted from. We also have a marketplace product, and handle both sort of the commercial side of support and development of Ellington as a CMS product, and also support our internal news gathering staff.
My name is Joshua Ginsberg. Everyone calls me Jag, but I'm the Senior Systems Administrator for the Free Software Foundation. And the FSF, the Systems Administration Office, the FSF, is responsible for maintenance of all the systems related to the GNU project, as well as all the internal systems for the Free Software Foundation in its campaign and staff support methods. And we use Django internally at this point for a lot of our campaigns work, for the Free Software Directory, shop.fsf.org, and a smattering of other smaller projects within the enterprise.
Hi, my name is Jason Yan, and I'm a co-founder of a startup called Discuss. And Discuss is just a web service that enhances comments that exist on websites. And one of the things we provide is we allow users to actually track comments they leave on other websites.
Hi, I'm Leah Culver. I'm a co-founder and a developer on Pounce.com, which is a social networking website for sharing media and messages.
I'm Mike Greer. I'm the director of web technology at a shadowy media empire called The Onion. And so we're responsible for The Onion website itself, which is, and the AV Club, which is a cultural criticism site and or pop culture site, and a site we just launched, which is built in Django, although other pieces of those sites are in Django, called Decider, which is in Chicago right now, and is a sort of local events and entertainment coverage site.
Hi, I'm Andy McCurdy. I work for Whiskey Media. I'm an engineer there, and we currently have two sites deployed on Django, giantbomb.com and comicvine.com, and between the couple of us, we have been using Django for about 6 months now.
And I should mention, in the interest of full disclosure, that Matt is a former coworker and Andy is a current coworker, so a little bit of nepotism on this panel. I apologize. So Michael, why Django? Why did you decide to start using Django? What other things did you look at the time?
Well, we looked at, so right now The Onion is in Drupal, big open source project. And we had a new, much more dynamic site that we were coming up with, Decider, where we built some prototypes in PHP and frameworks and in Cake PHP, and it was way too slow. And there was a terrifying moment in which I had to say to my overlords that we were going to have to switch languages, that we were going to have to come up with something new. And so we went and we assessed a bunch of languages. And we already built a bunch of things in Python, and Django was really fast, and it felt right to us. I come from a Java world, so it was very familiar to me in terms of, like I'm a Hibernate sort of struts guy, and so there were some patterns that were familiar. Some of the Rails experience, it seemed right, and in the language we wanted, which was Python, because they hate my Java background, and I'm starting to hate PHP, and so it was a good spot. And for us also, we started to build. We'd spent like a month building a prototype, and then we built a new one in Django, and we were able to turn it around very quickly and show the designers and everyone things they wanted very quickly, and it worked.
So I know, Andy, that you two had developed in PHP for quite a while before switching over to Django at Whiskey. Can you talk a bit more about that as well?
Yeah, so most of the engineers that I work with at Whiskey were former CNET engineers. We worked on TV.com, MP3.com, and GameSpot, which are all large PHP sites. And when we came over to Whiskey Media, we started off on a PHP platform as well. And it got to the point where I kind of saw us going in the same direction that we went at CNET, which was that I didn't feel like the code bases that we were developing was going to be maintainable. We kind of had our own homegrown framework, and it probably was about as functional as 10% of what's in Django. So switching to something a little more formal, a little more, or a lot more thought out was a great benefit for us.
Does anyone else want to talk about, have any different experiences with looking at different software? Want to share anything there?
Yeah, same with me. Like I guess like Michael and Andy also mentioned they came from PHP, and it was the same for me. And I felt, I was wanting to switch to Python anyways, and I was also looking for like MVC frameworks, and it just so turned out that Django was something like, it seemed like everything I wanted in a framework, and it wasn't PHP. So I was actually really happy about it.
For web stuff, the Free Software Foundation has pretty much always used Python, but that's because sometimes it's difficult to explain exactly the difficulties involved when you're working with an organization that has had a continuous computing infrastructure for the last 25 years. I'm not even kidding that we have servers that have files that have timestamps from the late 80s, and it's still the same file system that has always existed. We have to do continuous movements, and so we have continuous skill sets among our people. And we had previously done all of our stuff in Zope, and the only problem is that our systems administrators usually hang around for about 2 to 3 years. And when I first ran into Zope, I was told it is easy to use, you're just stupid. And which I think is like the unofficial slogan of Zope. But and so when we started looking for other things, we saw Django, and its biggest selling point for us was I learned it in a week, and I was able to make something that I could use in a week. And when you're talking about bringing in a systems administrator who can only develop part-time and who may or may not have actually done anything real in Python before, having a platform that's as well documented, that is as, if not always backward compatible, but at least lets you know what it is that you can expect to break, it was a big selling point, because we just don't have a lot of time in order to bring a new person up to speed.
Is there anyone on the group who is coming from Rails or maybe uses Rails simultaneously and has something you specifically miss? I am hugely envious of Rails migrations and annoyed that, and luckily downstairs they're dealing with this issue right now, so I expect that by the end of the hour we'll have this solution solved. But is there anything else from Rails or maybe some other popular tools that you miss in Django?
Object cache and the ORM. I miss it from Hibernate. I like crazy. I'd pine for it.
Do you want to explain maybe what that is? I suspect there's probably some people who don't know exactly.
I think there's a lot of people who strongly disagree with me and have expressed to my team their disagreement. But that basically, magically inside the ORM, you keep, you cache the objects and their associations, and you maybe also can, in Hibernate, you can set up arbitrary query caches as well for very common, more complex, and it's, they invalidate and refill because the ORM knows what's getting saved and changed. So, and you get performance improvements that are incredible.
Actually, we just added that to Pounce, and we just wrote a custom manager for it. Or Mike wrote a custom manager for it.
So one common theme that I'm hearing in the discussion of what other tools were looked at or considered or previously used is that all of these other tools, with the exception of Java and Hibernate in the past, although not anymore, are open source. Now I know JAG at the FSF, commercial software isn't closed source software rather isn't an option.
What is this open source you speak
exactly. of? Exactly. So right, apparently even open source is an option for you as well. But I'm curious for the rest of the panelists for whom this isn't a dictate. Was open source free software a given from the very beginning in your company's technology decisions, or was there a debate between closed and open source?
There was never a question that it would always going to be open source, partially because we knew from using Drupal forever that, when we had troubles, we forked it. It was ours, and we could change what we wanted. And I was coming from a world at other media companies where closed source products, if they were bad, the company had to stick with them for, a decade and really stay coding Tickle forever, for instance. I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about, which CMS. So that's why.
Cool. Did you want to? Okay, so shifting gears a little bit. Tell us the size of your team, engineers, designers, sysadmins, et cetera. Why don't we, Andy, we'll start down at the end and come back this way.
So Whiskey Media has 3 engineers, including myself, 4 counting Jacob, but he's been on Django 1.0 duty for the last 3 months, and we have 1 designer.
The Onion has 3 developers, and then me, who is allowed to commit code sometimes if things get tough. We have a lot of designers, actually, because we're a newspaper, so we have like 1 serious committed web designer and then a lot of others that help, probably 2 other major designers.
The entire Pounce development team is actually here, and it's it's me and Mike Malone, who's in the back, and so two developers, a part-time designer, and a part-time sysadmin.
Like Pounce, the whole Discuss team is as well here. We are currently 3 developers, 2 back end, 1 front end, and we just lost our summer intern, unfortunately, last week. So.
Depending on HR availability, we've maxed out at having 2 part-time Django developers and 2 template designers.
We've got 7 or 8 developers, depending on whether you count me or not. I'm sort of doing some dev management stuff. We've got, I think, 4 or 5 designers, and that's split up sort of between, handling internal property stuff and commercial stuff. So it feels weird, the little company from Kansas being sort of the big company here.
I want to actually expand this question out into the audience as well. So. Raise your hand if you're sort of the biggest site you work on is you or more people. So everyone, you should be raising your hands at this point, right? And now put your hands down if keep your hands up if it's you and another guy and maybe some more people. So 2 or more, right? Who are on teams of 5 or more? 10, anybody? Anybody on a team of 20 or more? Hi, Cal. So I may actually ask a couple questions of you, Hansa, in a minute, but I want to start with the smallest team here, and I think that's you, Leah. So what what problems do you have being a small team? I think that might be an obvious question, but also, and what are your favorite things about being, you and Mike?
Well, when we started Pounce, I was the only developer, and we didn't really have a sysadmin for a couple months in. And the really horrible thing about being the only developer was I had no one to give me feedback and no one to review my code. And I had this subversion log that was like Leah Culver, Leah Culver, Leah Culver. And no one ever looked at anything I ever did. And the best thing about it was that I got to make every single decision for every single piece of software in the entire stack. And that was really fun, but also very intimidating. And I guess, and I got to pick all open source stuff because I was broke. So that was good. But then starting working with someone else has been, like a million times better. You'd think, we'd get twice the work done, but we end up getting like 4 times the work done of a single person. So,
Jag, has that been a similar experience for you?
My team, we've got 2.5 guys that are in charge of taking care of GNU, FTP GNU, FSF, fence post GNU, all the campaigns websites, the directory, the shop, all the internal systems. We have about 40 systems, about 750,000 web hits a day, and 2.5 guys in charge of it. I think our biggest problem is that we have way more to do than we have people who could do it. As a side note, we're hiring if anybody wants a job. But yeah, I don't know if it really answered the question.
So moving to the other end of the spectrum, Matt, and I have insider knowledge here. When we hired Matt, it was he and I and Dan, and that was the team. And now it's around 15. You said, yeah. Totally. So, and I was here through some of this, so I could probably answer this question myself. But as someone who suffered from my mistakes as a manager, tell me about the challenges in moving from a team that small to sort of the medium-sized team you are now.
Yeah, there's definitely been tons of challenges between bringing new people onto a relatively large code base with a pretty significant learning curve. And sort of the general growing pains of what works for 2 or 3 people doesn't necessarily work as far as the amount of formalization and project management and just lots of things that work for 1 or 2 people don't necessarily scale very very linearly. So yeah, we've had to get more formal. I'm doing less development and more managing who's working on what and where we're headed project wise. Which has been, sort of both good and bad, less coding, less fun, but, making sure that we're, continuing to go in the right direction and continuing to innovate was sort of really important for me on going in that direction. And I think a lot of the, sort of the things that we suffered from when you were around was just, not having some dedicated resources to things that needed, some business support stuff. We have more people to do that. So when you grow your developer designer team, you also need to grow sort of support infrastructure around that.
I see, Jason, from downstairs that you guys are hiring as well. So what challenges do you see as you grow your team, and have you planned to change your work environment as your team gets bigger?
So that's a funny question. I guess we only, when we got one additional, or our first employee, it was actually a pretty big change, but I think after a while it kind of, I guess, became what it was, like a small team again, and I think going to 4 or 5 would be the next big thing, and it would be nice because you get other opinions, because when you're a small team you just have your own opinion, and maybe it might not be the right one, or there might be better solutions out there, but I mean, with the time you have and with the size of your team, you really can only go with what you have at that time.
Actually, while we're on the topic of hiring, I'd be interested, for those of you who hired people, were they already Django developers, or?
You read my mind, James. That's the next question on my list. So why don't we then move on to that line of attack? I get a lot of emails from people who want help hiring Django developers. There's obviously a need out there. sites like Django Gigs are doing a lot of traffic on people looking for Django developers. So why don't let's talk a bit about hiring process, how you find people, how you interview them, how that's worked in the past. Leah, why don't we start with you? How'd you hire Mike? How'd that go?
Oh, that's a great story. So we actually weren't really hiring anyone, and we had just launched Pounce, and we weren't doing interviews. And the only thing I could talk about was development. So the team and I agreed, we're like, okay, Leah, if anybody asks you development questions, it's fine. You can tell what the site is built on. And I was like, okay, that's fine, because we put it on our about page. It's like, here's, we use, Python, we use Django, all that sort of thing. And I actually got an email interview from a blogger who's just like, yeah, I want to know, what's the site built on? And just a bunch of questions about performance and about how I built the site. And I was like, okay, fine. So I answered the question, sent him back, and it was the only thing published on Pounce. So it made it to the front page of Dig. It was hugely popular because people were like, they wanted to talk to anyone from Pounce. And I sent an email back to the guy and was like, hey, you should come to our launch party. Or he said he was moving to San Francisco, so I'm like, hey, you should come to our launch party and say hi. And he came, and we talked for a while, and I thought he was a really great guy, and we kept in touch and ended up hiring him, which is kind of an odd way to hire someone. So that's Mike, the other developer, and it's worked out pretty well. He's actually a PHP guy, but I think it's not so much important, or he was PHP before Pounce. And it wasn't so much what language or what particular, little niche thing, I guess, that people know. Like what I'd look for when I'm hiring is really someone who fits both the company culture and has motivation to do cool stuff. Because the thing I care about, I think, most with Pounce from a technical perspective is that we're doing interesting things. And a lot of that isn't staying with well-known technologies. It isn't with doing the safe thing. It isn't with building the safe site. It's about really pushing things forward and moving. I think in the future of Pounce, we're moving towards a direction that's a little more sketchy, not really well-traveled area of web applications. So,
Jason, what about you? What challenges have you seen in in hiring?
So for hiring, I guess we don't even, or I guess we prefer if people know Django, but it's actually not a requirement, mainly because if someone's really good at coding, they're going to be able to code in Django or X framework regardless. So, our first hire, luckily he did know Django, and he actually knew quite a bit of Django, so it worked out for us. But, I don't think it's a requirement for us that the person knows Django. And actually, if someone knows PHP and Perl, we actually do PHP and Perl as well, so I don't want to do that myself.
So for our positions, our guys have to handle everything from soldering to. No, I'm not kidding. We actually solder our own BIOS chips onto all of our workstations because we use Core Boot free BIOS, and so everything.
Aren't these guys hardcore? It's awesome.
Everything from soldering to compiling your own BIOS to systems administration, basic stuff, all the way to very high level stuff, then to Perl scripting, and then Django and web applications programming. So among our team, we keep a pretty good balance of who's good at what. I think the hardest part for us is trying to find somebody whose particular areas of specialization balance out the rest of the team. Because when you're living in Boston and offering union wages but still nonprofit wages, and asking somebody to be able to do everything from compile a BIOS to solder a chip to do scalable systems administration to doing Zen and clustering, and then also on top of that being able to do web systems programming that's actually good software engineering. The skill set is rather large, and I think the hardest part is finding somebody that has a willingness to pick up the skills they don't have, a willingness to expand the skills they do have, and accept the sort of coolness factor of getting to work at the Free Software Foundation, even if it means taking a salary position that's far lower than you might get competitively elsewhere.
I know, Matt, I spent quite a while trying to hire people before you took over, and when you did, the logjam broke. So what's your secret? What'd you do?
I think we've had really good success both hiring out of the Django community. I mean, I got my job from Jacob private messaged me in IRC, you know, read my blog and stuff I had been working on and was like, hey, dude, you want a job? I was like, heck yeah. I mean, we've had a really good job of sort of both hiring out of the community and also because Django's really really easy to pick up. You know, we've had people that have 0 to very little Django experience that rock. The thing that I look for a lot when I'm looking at hiring a developer is first thing I do is go to Google Code and see if they've got any little projects up. That's always sort of a pretty big bonus. Definitely passionate about something. It doesn't necessarily have to intersect a whole lot with what we do, but passionate about coding, passionate about something, and we all have our strange, weird hobbies, and sometimes it's code, sometimes it's something else. But I think in our particular situation, just making it someone's job to go find people. Before there's always more work than there are people. So if you have to slice off a little bit of someone's time and say you're dedicated to finding people.
This is a question just about hiring. How important is geographic location, do you think, when you're making a hiring decision? I've worked with people close and also remotely, and I feel like there's definitely a cost. And so when I'm looking for someone, I'm just wondering how you guys evaluate that for a new decision.
I'm going to repeat the question. The question is about how important is geographic location to someone you're hiring. I imagine you're asking, do you just hire people local or willing to move locally, or do you hire people who are anywhere in the world as long as they're the right people? And what are the challenges of each of those sort of policies and scenarios?
There's no 2 members of my team that work in the same office. We're completely distributed. That was accidental. In fact, we're under constant pressure to try to not do that anymore. And certainly it would be cooler if you were all in the same place, but certainly, I don't know, ideally the right person is better than the right place. Because you can always, with our kind of jobs, you can make that work. However, if for like a really small, like a new product, you want to be really collaborative and you want to be able to draw things on the wall and, like that's very important. So, it's a mix.
We don't really care where you live so long as you're willing to show up in Boston from 9 to 5 every day.
Yeah, it's tough. With such a small team, we've gotten applicants from everywhere, and it's really hard for a tiny team to work remotely. I think it works better as the team gets larger and you have someone who's dedicated manager or things like that. But there's also something to be said about someone willing to move for work. It's not, I mean, this is probably the meanest thing I'll say this entire day, but it's not just about location, it's about the ability to go the extra mile for the job. And when the extra mile is the extra 10,000 miles, it means something.
If we talk about OpenID, I can get you to say something meaner today, I'm sure. So I wanted to ask sort of a tangential question to Andy and Mike at the end. You guys both sort of were in the position of moving a team using an existing technology and sites already built on existing technologies to Django. So you weren't exactly hiring completely for all those positions, but you were more like convincing people that you already had to take on a new job. So it's sort of an internal hiring type situation. Can you talk about that a bit?
Actually, I'm the one that had to get Django'd forcefully last fall, where basically my team told me, like, absolutely impossible. Here's what it has to be Django. Stop complaining, sell it. We're doing it. And then I just hire Matt's employees. That's my strategy. We did. We hired Tom, who's a real Django expert. But everyone was very excited. I mean, from a manager's perspective, having exciting technology to work on is really productive because people really want to work on it, and that job that never got done because no one's interested because it's a pain in the ass in the current framework suddenly is fun and suddenly is exciting, and everything happens and it's magical. So you always want to, internally it's very good to have new technology instead of like I said before, coding in Tickle for decades.
I think everyone on my team was pretty frightened when I brought up the Django route. I was the only one that had any Python experience on the team. Everyone else had only worked in PHP before. I guess it took about a week of me just beating people over the head, trying to get them to give it a chance. One of the harder selling points was, we already have a fair bit of legacy code in PHP, and if we're going to have two separate code bases, that means that, okay, now we need to support both of them, and we didn't really know how much of a learning curve Django was going to be, or in the other engineers, Python for that matter. So there was some reluctancy there, but through perseverance, the decision actually got made in my favor. So
I think there's a certain plasticity that's required for somebody who is used to working in a different system to suddenly move to Django, because Django has this really awesome and really terrible personality in that it's a mule. And it has a way that it really wants to do things. And if you just go along with it, it's going to do that really well and really easily for you. But if that's not the way that you instinctually want to do things and you fight it, you are going to get nowhere but frustrated. And I think the hardest part for people who have been working in different systems to pick up Django and to start working in Django is the frustration that when it doesn't work exactly as they expect from their previous system experience, their conclusion is Django is stupid, and there's the obvious upsides, for a community like us and for a very single-focused toolkit like ours to have the way of doing things that's right and easy, and even if everything else that if there's a different vector you want to take that's hard, I mean that's why it's Python and not Perl, while it's very easy to learn, it requires the person who's approaching it to have a open willingness to consider that the way that they might instinctually want to approach a problem may not be the way to solve the problem best in terms of getting it done fast.
So I think let's shift gears again and move into some more technical aspects of your sites and your situations. Oh. Yeah, please do. Do you want to come up and...
Yeah. Hi. I just want to say a few things that probably the situation is entirely different outside of U.S. And that's one important thing, for especially with hiring. There are, I guess, 3 or 4 people in Czech Republic who work on Django and are not on my team. So it's sort of tough to find someone new or stuff like that. We had to train internal people that worked originally on PHP. Some of them are still fighting back since they were very comfortable with PHP. They've done it for ages, and now they're suddenly faced with this framework that has so many layers, and we added a few on top of Django, so it's even more. So they cannot just suddenly stop and do print this and see the result and continue working from there, but they have to go through several steps. So it really it's not just about the language or the framework itself. It's completely different style of work. So that was the toughest part. On the other hand, it also brought us the opportunity to do things right. If you learn your first programming language, you just learn it to write something. But if you're redoing it, if you're learning another one, it's very easy to attach another set of skills to that. For example, unit testing or testing in general. We don't have a single line of PHP tests in our company. Well, no, that might not be true. But we have very, very little tests for PHP code, and we have quite a few. On the other hand, like 80–90% of our Python code is well tested. So it's sort of the change towards Django and Python brought us the opportunity to just say, hey, do it right this time. So.
Based on that, if I could just follow up with a question for the panel, so I guess I'm close enough. For the panel, the question would be, each one of you, do you use in your teams continuous integration and code coverage, as well as having a policy that you can only check in when the build is green? And maybe is that an all-test build or just some smoke or small test segment of the full build if the full build's too slow? I'm really curious if each one of you do that, because it seems important, but it's hard to have that discipline. I wonder what, and if you do that, or if you don't, how does that impact your productivity and your ability to move forward fast because you can trust the code that's underneath you?
That's a great question. Yeah, why don't we each take on that question and talk about testing, code reviews, if that's something you do. I know that's something that they're really big on here at Google, so it's worth discussing, or any other sort of code quality metrics or tools that each of you use. Andy, you want to start?
So I'm ashamed to say that we have very little unit testing code in our apps so far. We do have a bit, but it's kind of sparse. We do plan on integrating that in the near future. Before the end of the year, we hope to have at least 80 or 90% code coverage. I imagine that it will be a productivity hit immediately, or initially rather. Having done these kind of integrations before, but I think once the team kind of gets the idea behind it, it'll actually save time in the long run.
Yeah, we don't have anything like what you're talking about at all. I think possibly because, like with small teams, everyone has the code inside their heads, and you're building something brand new. So for us to build unit tests with every iteration, like every 3-week iteration of it, we show it, and then the functionality is changed, and we do it again. It would really slow us down. We're going to build unit tests now that the functionality is locked down, and we're happy, and so we can put safe launches out. But it's also very hard to say we need an extra month for the launch of this product to build unit tests in, because everyone believes us, but they're like, well, can I have an extra month for my unit tests for my deliverable? Like it's a magical interior project for us that's hard to sell, whereas the delivery of something is a lot easier. That said, like my guys, they're always telling me, Tom is always like, unit tests, we need unit tests. What's our unit test plan? And he's right.
Well, at Pounce, first of all, you have to be competent in the language. So we have these language tests that you have to pass before you can check in any code. And then after that, we also have a reviewer. So you have to check it in and have your reviewer review it, and they send you back. And there's this whole web application built for it. And no, just kidding. This isn't Google. No, nothing like that. We have branches that we do experimental development on. We use svnmerge.py. Go download it. It's awesome if you use Subversion. We review each other's code before we release, and we release almost every day. So, and we're writing tests. We're in the process of it. So, after a year and a half.
Yeah, our policy is that tests are great, but we don't have nearly enough. And I guess one of the things is, before, when we were just a 2-person team, there was literally like no tests. There was a few unit tests here and there, but we weren't testing as much as we should have been. And then at least now we have quite a decent code coverage for at least that we'll be confident to push out a release. But I guess one of the reasons is just that when we were a 2-person team, it would slow us down a lot. Like I would try to work on tests like for a few days, but then I would realize, I need to do all this other stuff. Like people will be emailing us about bugs, or maybe we need to get a feature out for someone that was requesting it, and those just pushed off tests, unfortunately, and that's just how it was for us. But I mean, for other policies like code review, I mean, there's no formal standard. We're only 3 people, but before we ever push anything, we all take a look at the code, make sure everything looks sane. We run our sanity checks, and it's good for us for now.
I happen to believe that unit tests are the sorts of things that you write first and not write last. But one of the very few truisms in software engineering is that, you three things, but only pick two. You can have it now, you can have it right, and you can have it cheap, but you can only pick 2 out of 3. Depending on the situation, we may opt for cheap and now. Because we're who we are, we can't ever sacrifice the cheap. So depending on how bad it would be if something broke. So for example, we have a script which bills our associate members whose subscriptions have expired. And turns out that more than other things, if you have a coding error that affects people's money, it's bad. So for the things that we are rolling out that touch people's money or touch our money, or do things that make a very high-profile whoops, yes, we will take the time to put the appropriate testing measures in place, and that's part of the standard engineering cycle. For things that had to be done last Tuesday, we generally kind of have to sacrifice it just out of expediency.
It feels really weird, but I'm actually going to answer this in kind of a good way. We lived without tests for a really long time because, it was Jacob and I, and then Jacob and I.
My bad.
Yeah, so we lived for a really long time without tests, and it was okay. And yeah, sites went down every now and again, and oops, yeah, my bad. I broke the build. But these days, we've been devoting pretty significant resources over the last couple months to, as we're porting Ellington from a really, really old version of Django to Django 1.0. We've put a lot of time into, both porting it and as the process, since we have to touch every line of code anyway, test it. I think we've got close to 300 tests that include both doc test stuff and unit tests. We've got a build bot that runs after every couple of check-ins that I, as a corporate manager dude, keep an eye on and yell at Eric or Jeff Triplett when he messes something up. But yeah, no, it's been a really good thing that's kind of saved us a lot of time, even very recently. When new comments landed, we knew exactly, or we think we knew, like there are half a dozen places that we needed to update. When US State Field dropped a couple days before 1.0, it was sort of really easy to know because we had all those test failures, and so it really gives more confidence to, if I'm making a big change, refactoring a whole lot, knowing that. Yes, I didn't break anything, sort of gives me more confidence to do what I'm doing. Usually when we're doing development, we'll do, because running the whole test suite takes, a fair amount of time. We usually, just test the app as we're developing it, and then, try and, go for coffee and run the whole test suite, or worst case scenario, check it in and check the build bot in a little bit just to make sure. But yeah, it's a very different place to live and a very nice place to live. But it's come at the expense of 2 or 3 months of development time for 4 or 5 people. So
I just have something to add for the Onion. I actually do have a magical script that tests each of our templates before we actually do push a revision. So there is some amount of testing, and it's because some of the problems that can appear are data dependent that wouldn't appear in a test suite, where some user data might get in there that maybe there's a Unicode decode error or something like that, that we wouldn't necessarily detect. We do actually load all of our pages before we do a restart, and I'm actually just talking right now to plug a feature request. Please don't reload templates from the disk, so that I can do a atomic restart to a new SVN revision without having new templates that come in from a new revision affecting data output.
Don't reload templates from disk. So following up with the from the testing / infrastructure point of view, what does your deployment environment look like for each of you? Do you have a staging and then a deployment server, or is it straight from your laptop to the internets? Do you run and so that's actually let's do that. What do you have, a deployment environment or a deployment staging environment? Matt, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, we have a dedicated staging server where our sysadmin set up to let us sort of stage, live data, test data, snapshot data for any of our sites. So development usually goes, laptop to staging server to deployed after, tests are completed and run and stuff. And our deployment system, we use Capistrano with some custom deployment commands that, deploys to a couple of different stacks of hardware.
I think the coolest thing about this panel so far is making me salivate over the things that we'd do if we had time. So we do have a staging server. It's very cutely named Jam Session, but we test. That's where we build everything and test everything. And we also have a kind of cool system. We have all of our templates are in Subversion, and so the template loader that all of our systems use is a Subversion template loader. And what it does is we wildcard the DNS entry for each of our Django deployments. So, for example, internally on our DNS, there is a star.directory.fsf.org, which corresponds to which branch of the SVN repository to pull the templates from. So our template designers can branch the templates and test an entirely new template layout without affecting the production site. And as soon as they merge their branch back into trunk, then that goes live on the site, and they don't have to bother me, which is always a plus.
So I can't believe I'm having to say this to someone at the Free Software Foundation, but come on, open source that. Release it as free software, excuse me.
There's an issue that we have internally with that, because all of the code that I develop internally can only be licensed as AGPL v3. Now, first of all, please use AGPL v3. AGPL v3 is awesome. It is the Affero addition to the GPL says that for any modified downstream version of a web application, a prominently displayed link must be made to make available the source of those modifications so that everybody can benefit from having modified something they downloaded that was under a free license. So if Django were GPL v3, AGPL v3, then anybody who used Django but then modified it internally would have to make available to the rest of the world their internal modifications so that everybody could benefit from those changes. But one of the tricks of AGPL v3 is that it's not like GPL v3 in that you have to release the app. You have to release the app and all of its dependencies all the way down to the system libraries, except the system libraries. So for a Django application, I would have to release Django and PsychoPG and PostgreSQL.lib and ModPython.lib and libsvn and Subversion and everything that it would take to build this, which turns out to be a lot. As soon as we can get the internal licensing stuff figured out, yes, we actually have a system, code.fsf.org, where we will be pushing all of our stuff that we've been writing out. But until we can figure that part out, no.
So we actually use a Subversion hook to run run our test suite against the branch that it was committed against after every single commit. So I mean, it sort of mimics the production server. It's not quite a staging environment, but this is, I mean, it's worked for us so far. And I mean, the only thing we actually use a staging environment for is if we do like maybe large schema changes or something that really involves the database. But usually app changes, we're comfortable with using our test server and just running tests. And once we get the green light, we push with and we use Capistrano to do that.
I'm not going to attempt sarcasm again. But we have, in addition to local development environments, we have a staging server with like a staging site, but we also have local development environments on that staging server. So our designer prefers to use that instead of running it locally. And we also, yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I stated it a little strongly before. It's not like we never test anything and just throw it up from laptops. So we do have a staging server, which is named Teasdale. The production server is named Anchower. If you're Onion fans, you know these are columnists. All the servers are named after them, even the dead ones. Kornfeld. And so we put it on testing, and we all test it. We run John's tests, and then we pull it onto Anchower.
Depending on where we are in the development stage of a site, we'll have a staging server, primarily for like content people to come and be able to see, what we're working on, and the be able to actually, edit content in an environment that's not going to just disintegrate one day. Once a site is out of the first phase of development, we generally shy away from keeping that test server or staging server up to date.
So, quick question. We'll start down there with Andy. What version or versions of Django are you running in production?
We're running almost 1.0. I think it's 8165, something like that.
Tom has it running on 1.0 on his laptop. He just has to commit it. And then it will go to the testing server, go through all of our rigorous unit tests. Now, he'll just launch it right out of this room in like 5 minutes.
All right, Tom, you got your laptop? Go.
We're on 7599. We're working on moving it to 1.0, but we have lots of file uploading. So.
We use a revision. I can't remember what number now, but it's one pretty recently after query set refactoring landed. So, we're working for 1.0, but we still got a few deprecation warnings to work out. And, we also have our own Django that's in our repository. It's not heavily modified, but just stuff that hasn't been pushed quite yet. And it kind of works out for us because that way we don't get blocked by Django if we need a feature really bad.
We use whatever release of Django was current when we released the software, which is everything from 0.96 plus about 100 to 1.0 minus about 500.
Yeah, so the version that we run internally in production for all of our World Company sites is probably the oldest version of Django still in production. I dare someone to beat us. Revision 1290, which is post 9.0 and pre 9.1, November 2005, I think November 19th or so. I'm not proud of that at all. We do have our current commercial version of Ellington that we run both a hosted and a licensed version of. Runs on Django 9.1, getting a little better. The version of Ellington that's in testing that we're finishing up and we'll be deploying live hopefully this month internally and next month commercially is going to be 1.0, and we're 6 failing tests away from being there.
So we've got about 7 minutes left here, and so I want to use this opportunity to let you all formally make a pony request. What is one thing that is not in Django that would make your lives, your company's lives, your products easier, better, faster, etc.? Matt, you want to start?
Yeah, I think migrations are probably our biggest pain point, and I know there are people down here that are pissed because they're going to say that too. We use, for our marketplace product, we use Django Evolution, which works pretty well, but I think part of it is I don't understand it well enough to really sort of know what's going on under the hood. So I definitely look forward to a day where we've got Django contrib migrate that just sort of works and makes sense to me.
I got my wish, which was 1.0, because after following 0.96 for however long, I really thought it was kind of like Duke Nukem Forever. No, I would say that going toward 1.1, my biggest request is going to be the sort of dirty attributes things, so that right before you save a model, you can know exactly what's changed, which is small in the scale of things.
Yeah, it seems my request would also involve the ORM. I guess I have 2 of them. One of them is kind of there, but one of them being the multiple database support would be great. But as I understand it, the framework is there for it, so I'm pretty excited for that. And I guess the second one, which is also completed as far as I know, or somewhat, is the SQL aggregate support. But we're pretty close, so that's exciting.
Yeah, I'd have to side with dirty fields for model saving. But we already got our pony request, which was 2070, the large file uploads, streaming uploads. and opt groups, which was like the weirdest pony request ever, but we got that, so that was nice. And then I totally forgot where I was going. Oh, we do have a multi-DB for MySQL working with the current, and so basically query set refactor allowed us to do multiple databases for MySQL, and hopefully someone will write a blog post about that sometime. So.
Great. Can we have your stuff? The object cache and the MySQL, because migrating from something else to Django, that would help multiple databases. All right. Is there anything else we want? Singletons.
What? Go back to Java.
Hey, it's not the first time I've heard that.
I think everyone else kind of stole most of my number ones. Migrations, we just moved to a project called South that has been fairly pleasant. Ticket number 17, I'm a big fan of. And not a whole lot else, actually. Yeah, it's pretty complete.
Row level permissions, please. But that's easy. We can do that.
I'll vote for ticket 17.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists? Thanks a lot.